Mom, you are a witch and I regret bringing you to my house. I don't ever want to see you again. Get out of my house.
The day Mama packed her small bag and left the village, she did not know she was walking into a trap dressed as a blessing. Her name was Margaret, but everyone called her Mama, Mama Margaret, the woman who had survived her husband's death with nothing but 2 hands, 1 son, and a God she talked to like a neighbor. She had farmed, she had suffered, she had eaten salt and pepper soup on nights when there was no meat, no fish, nothing, just the hot broth and the memory of better days. She had done all of it so that her son, Tobechukwu, her Toby, could go to school, could wear clean uniforms, could become something. And he did become something. Toby grew up, got a good job in Lagos with an oil servicing company, married a woman named Sarah, moved into a 3-bedroom flat in Lekki, and bought a Toyota Highlander. He was not rich in the way that makes newspapers, but he was comfortable in the way that makes village people talk. And the village people talked. They talked plenty. But the one thing that kept pulling at Toby's heart, the one thing that sat on his chest every morning before he opened his eyes, was his mother. Alone in that old compound in Neri, talking to chickens, waiting for his weekly calls, getting older. So one Sunday after church, he told Sarah, "I want to bring Mama to Lagos." Sarah smiled. "Of course, baby. She is your mother." That smile should have told him everything. It was too quick, too smooth, like she had been rehearsing it. Mama arrived on a Tuesday. She came with a bag that was more prayers than clothes, a worn Bible, a bottle of olive oil from her pastor, 2 wrappers, 3 blouses, and a small tin of the ogiri she used for her soup. She stood at the door of that Lekki flat with wide eyes, touching the marble floor with her slippers, like she was afraid to scratch it. "Toby," she whispered, "God has blessed you." Toby hugged her and wept. Real tears, the kind that start in the stomach. He did not see Sarah standing behind them, watching, not smiling, calculating. The first week was fine. Mama woke at 5 every morning, swept the compound, fetched water even though there was a tap, and cooked the kind of food that made Toby close his eyes when he ate. Ofe onogbun with cocoyam, egusi with ede, bitter leaf soup that tasted like Sunday in the village. But Sarah did not eat Mama's food. "I don't want her in my kitchen," she told Toby quietly one night. "She doesn't know how to keep things clean." Toby blinked. "Mama raised me. She is the cleanest woman I know." "I'm just saying," Sarah said, rolling over. "This is my house." That was the first stone. Small, easy to miss, but it was the foundation of a wall that would eventually crush an old woman's spirit. By the second week, Sarah had stopped greeting Mama in the mornings. She would walk past her in the corridor without a word, not good morning, not a nod, nothing, just cold air and the sound of heels on marble. Mama noticed. Of course she noticed. Old women who have survived hard lives notice everything. But she said nothing. She swallowed it the way she had swallowed everything, quietly, with prayer and patience. She told herself, "It is her house. I am a visitor. I will not cause trouble." But trouble does not need an invitation. It was already living there. Sarah was beautiful. That was not a lie. She was the kind of beautiful that walks into a room and rearranges it. Tall, smooth-skinned, with a laugh that could make a man forget his own name. She had come from a middle-class family in Abuja, studied accounting, and married Toby at 28 because he was stable, ambitious, and, most importantly, easy to control. She had learnt early that soft words and a warm body could make a man do almost anything. What Toby did not know, what he would not discover until everything had already burned down, was that Sarah had a life before him she had never fully closed. A man named Desmond. A man who had broken her heart 3 years before Toby proposed. A man she had never stopped loving, even when she was wearing Toby's ring, sleeping in Toby's bed, spending Toby's money. But that part of the story comes later. For now, Sarah had a problem in the house, and that problem wore a wrapper and woke up at 5 in the morning to pray. She started small. She told Toby that Mama was going through her things. I found her in our room, Toby, just standing there. Toby frowned. Maybe she was just looking for something in our room? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not real tears, performed tears, the kind that hit a man like a slap. Your mother does not respect me in my own house. Toby went to Mama. Mama, please, don't enter our room. Mama looked at him, just looked at him. Something shifted in her chest, a small crack, like a dry stick bending before it breaks. When did I enter their room? She asked quietly. Toby, I did not enter that room. Mama, please, just to keep peace. She nodded. She always nodded. That was her tragedy. She loved too quietly to fight. Then came the food. Sarah told her friends that Mama was putting things in their food. She whispered it first, the way rumors are always born, in whispers. I don't know what she puts in that soup. It smells strange. Her friends gasped and leaned in closer, the way people do when they hear something delicious and terrible. Word got back to Toby through one of Sarah's cousins. Your wife is worried about your mother, the cousin said carefully. She thinks the old woman might be doing something. Toby laughed it off that time. He was not yet ready to believe it. He still had enough love in him to protect his mother. But Sarah was patient. She was building something brick by brick, and she was in no hurry. Meanwhile, Mama's life in that flat had shrunk to the size of a broom closet. She was no longer allowed to cook. Her food had been declared suspicious. She ate whatever the house girl prepared, sometimes late, sometimes cold, and she said nothing. She was no longer allowed to watch television after 9 because the sound disturbs us. So she sat in her room and read her Bible by the small lamp Toby had given her, mouthing the words, her lips moving in the dark, like a woman making peace with something she could not name. She stopped calling her friends in the village. What would she tell them? That her son's house felt like a prison? That the daughter-in-law who had smiled at the wedding now looked at her like a stain on the floor? She prayed instead. Morning and night she prayed. God, do not let me die here. But if I must stay, give me strength and protect my son. Protect Toby. He does not know what is happening. He is a good boy. He is still my good boy. She believed that. She held on to it the way a drowning person holds on to a plank. But the water was rising. If you feel this story in your chest, stay with me and subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Toby and Sarah had a son, Junior, 3 years old, round-cheeked, loud with Toby's eyes and Sarah's stubbornness. He was the kind of child who ran everywhere and laughed at everything, the kind of child who makes a house feel like it is alive. Mama loved Junior with a fierce, consuming love that only grandmothers understand. When Sarah was not looking, she would carry him, sing him the old Igbo songs her own mother had sung to her, whisper prayers into the soft skin behind his ear. Junior called her Mama Big and would toddle to her room every morning, still half asleep, looking for her. Those were the only moments in that house where Mama felt like herself. Then one Thursday, Junior became sick. It started as a fever, then vomiting. By night, the child was limp and glassy-eyed in a way that made the air in the room feel wrong. What nobody knew, what Sarah had kept to herself with a secret that would eventually destroy everything, was what had happened 2 days before. She had left a drink on her bedside table, one of those herbal concoctions she had been buying from a woman in the market. Something for weight loss, the woman said. Drink it morning and night. Sarah had forgotten it on the table when she went to shower. Junior wandered in because that was what Junior did. He wandered. He found the cup. It smelled sweet. He drank some. Sarah came back and saw the empty cup in his small hands. Her heart stopped. She told herself he had only taken a little. She cleaned the cup. She put it away. She watched him carefully. He seemed fine. Maybe nothing would happen. Something happened. By the time they rushed Junior to the hospital, his small body had already begun losing the fight. The doctors walked through the night. Toby stood outside the emergency room with his hands pressed against the wall, forehead against the cold tiles, shaking. Mama sat in the corner of the waiting room with her Bible pressed to her chest, rocking slowly, praying in a way that was beyond words. Just sound, just breath, just grief reaching upward. Junior did not make it to morning. The silence that descended on that house after Junior's death was the kind of silence that has weight. You could feel it pressing on your shoulders. You could feel it in the food you couldn't taste and the sleep that wouldn't come. Toby stopped going to work. He sat in the living room and stared at walls. He lost weight. His eyes went somewhere nobody could follow. Sarah did not grieve the way a mother should grieve. She grieved quickly, and then she began to think. Because Sarah's mind never stopped moving even in pain, especially in pain. She thought about the cup. She thought about what she had done and what would happen if anyone ever found out. She thought about the doctor's questions. Has the child ingested anything unusual? And the lie she had told. She thought about Toby, who was already cracking, who was already looking for something to blame. And she thought about Mama. Mama who was old and from the village. Mama who people already whispered about. Mama who had no power in this house, no allies, no voice that anyone would take seriously. Sarah began to plant seeds. Toby, she said one evening, sitting beside him in the dark. Her voice was soft, careful, like she was approaching a wounded animal. Toby, I didn't want to say this. God knows I didn't want to say this. Toby turned to look at her. But the way Junior went, so sudden, so strange. Toby, I am afraid. She let her voice tremble. Things have not been right in this house since your mother came. The business problems, the money we lost last month, and now Junior. Her voice broke. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying what I see. Toby said nothing, but something moved behind his eyes. The seed had found soil. They say grief can make a person stupid. Not foolish, stupid. It strips you down to your most afraid self. And in that place, you will believe anything that gives the pain a shape, a face, a name. Toby believed. He did not believe all at once. It came slowly, the way a good poison works. Sarah was careful. She never accused directly. She only asked questions. Mama, where were you when Junior drank that thing? Even though no one had established what Junior had drunk. She only suggested. You know, in the village, some people have things attached to them that follow them everywhere. She only whispered. To Toby, to her friends who came to mourn, to Toby's uncle who visited from the east. And then the money disappeared. Toby had savings, 3 million naira, kept in a fixed account he was building toward buying land. When he went to the bank, the account had been emptied, transferred out in 2 transactions he did not recognize to an account he did not know. He came home shaking. Sarah was waiting. I told you, she said, and she began to cry. I told you something was wrong in this house. Toby, your mother is a witch. She has killed your son. She is killing your money. She will kill you next if you don't do something. Something broke open inside Toby that day. The grief, the fear, the lost money, the lost child, it all collapsed into one dark, terrible thing. And that thing needed somewhere to go. He walked to his mother's room. Mama was sitting on her bed, reading her Bible, when the door opened. She looked up at her son and smiled. Still, even after everything, still smiled when she saw him. She did not see what was coming. Mama, Toby said. His voice was strange, flat, like someone had drained all the feeling out of it. Did you do something to Junior? Mama's smile faded. What? Did you do something to my son? Did you put something in? Toby, she stood up. What is this you are saying? Answer me. His voice cracked like a whip in that small room. Everyone is saying it. Sarah is saying it. Uncle Emeka is saying it. That things started going wrong when you came. Toby, her voice was quiet, steady, the way old things are steady. I am your mother. That doesn't mean I am your mother. She said it again, firmer this time, like she was trying to remind both of them. I carried you. I went hungry so you could eat. I walked to that school every time with your fees in my brassiere when your father was sick. I buried your father alone because you were writing your WAEC exams and I did not want to distract you. Her voice broke just once. Then she gathered it back. And you are standing in front of me asking if I killed your child? Toby's face was a war. But Sarah was in the corridor. He could feel her presence there, and the grief was too heavy, and the fear was too loud. He said, "Pack your things. I want you to go back to the village." The silence that followed was the loudest thing that room had ever heard. Mama looked at her son for a long time. She looked at him the way you look at something you are memorizing because you will not see it again. Then she turned and began to fold her wrappers. She did not beg, she did not curse, she did not call on God to punish anyone. She folded her blouses, packed her Bible, put her small tin of ogiri in her bag, and when she was ready, she carried the bag herself. But Toby was not done. Sarah had told him, don't let her leave quietly. People need to know. She needs to be publicly disgraced or she will come back. So Toby did the thing he would spend the rest of his life trying to forgive himself for. He dragged her out. He grabbed her arm in the corridor, his mother's arm, the arm that had held him as a baby, that wiped his tears, that clapped in church praising God for his life, and he pulled her toward the door while she stumbled, while the house girl stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, while Sarah watched from the living room with something that was not grief and not joy, but was worse than both. He pushed her out the front door and into the compound. Neighbors had gathered. Someone had called them, or maybe they had just heard the noise. They stood and watched as an old woman in a blue wrapper stood in a compound with a bag at her feet and her son standing over her, saying words that should never come out of a child's mouth. You are a witch. You killed my son. You are not welcome in my house. Go back to your village and stay there. Mama did not fall. She stood straight. She looked at him one last time. Then she picked up her bag and she walked to the gate and she walked through it and she did not look back because some wounds are too deep for looking back. Sarah watched Mama leave and felt something that surprised even her. Not guilt, not relief, but a kind of restless hunger. The last obstacle was gone. The house was hers. Toby was hers. Everything was hers. But Sarah had never wanted just the house. In the weeks that followed Mama's departure, something changed in Toby. He became a ghost of himself. He lost more weight. He stopped eating properly. He would wake at night and sit at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. And when Sarah touched him, he would flinch like a man who had just remembered something terrible. He had started calling the village. His aunt had told him Mama arrived home looking like a woman who had been beaten, not on her body, but somewhere deeper. She had not spoken for 2 days. She just sat in her room with her Bible and her silence. Toby began dreaming about Junior. Not warm dreams, terrible ones. Junior in the hospital bed, eyes open, looking at him. Junior asking, "Daddy, why did you send Mama Big away?" Toby would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, heart punching against his ribs. He tried to talk to Sarah about it. She would change the subject. or she would cry and say he was making her feel guilty, or she would pick a fight that somehow ended with Toby apologizing to her. He went back to the bank to investigate the missing 3 million. The bank launched an investigation. What they found was a trail. A careful trail, but a trail nonetheless. The transfers had been initiated from a device connected to the home Wi-Fi, a phone number that was eventually traced to a SIM card registered in a name nobody knew, but the billing address matched their flat. The account the money had been sent to was opened 6 months earlier. The account beneficiary had a surname Toby had never heard. He hired a private investigator. The investigator's report came on a rainy Wednesday. Toby sat in his car in the parking lot of his office and read it with his windows up and the engine off. Desmond Okafo, 36, worked in real estate, previously dated Sarah Adaize Okonkwo, now Sarah Tobechukwu, for 2 years before she met Toby. The relationship had not ended, it had only gone underground. The money had been moved to Desmond's account. There were other things in the report: hotel receipts, photographs, messages extracted from a backup. A conversation from 6 months ago in which Sarah wrote, "I just need to be patient. Once I sort out this mother issue and the money situation, I'm coming to you for good." Toby read that line 4 times. Sort out this mother issue. His own mother. The witch that his wife had built out of grief and manipulation. The witch that he had dragged through his own compound. The witch that he had thrown out into the world with her old bag and her Bible and her tin of ogiri. He sat in that car for a very long time. When he walked into the house that evening, Sarah was on her phone. She looked up and smiled, that same smooth, rehearsed smile from the very beginning. "You're home early," she said. Toby put the investigator's report on the dining table. He did not say a word. Sarah looked at it, then she looked at him, and for the first time since he had known her, the performance stopped. The face beneath the face showed itself. Not guilty, not afraid, but calculating. Still calculating. "I can explain." "Don't," Toby said quietly. "Toby, listen to me. You made me call my mother a witch. You made me drag my own mother out of my house. You made me stand in a compound in front of neighbors and say those words to a woman who went hungry for me." He stopped. He pressed his fist to his mouth. "She has not spoken properly since she went back. My aunt says she sits alone. She stops eating sometimes. You did that. You built that. And you used my grief and my son's death." He could not finish. Sarah stood up, and in that moment, she made her final calculation. There was nothing left to manage here. The game was over. She had been caught. There was only one move left. "I'm leaving," she said, not apologetically, flatly. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours." She went to the bedroom. She came back 20 minutes later with 2 suitcases that were already packed, had been packed, to be realized, for some time. She walked past him to the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. "For what it's worth," she said, and her voice was almost human for a moment, "your mother really did nothing wrong." Then she walked out, into a car that was already waiting. Desmond's car. She didn't even need to call him. The door closed behind her. And Tobechukwu, the boy Mama went hungry for, the man who stood in a compound and called the woman who made him a witch, sat down on the floor of his own house and wept. Not the weeping of anger, the weeping of a man who has finally seen himself clearly and does not like what he sees. He drove to Newi the next morning. He drove through the night, stopping only for fuel, arriving just as the village was waking up. The birds were loud. The air smelt of red earth and morning fires. He had forgotten how clean village air was. He found Mama in the back of the compound, seated on a low stool, her Bible open on her lap, her eyes closed, praying, still praying. After everything, still praying. He stood at the entrance of the compound for a long time watching her.
her grey hair, her thin shoulders, the slight tremble in her hands that had not been there when she came to Lagos. He had put that tremble there. He walked to her and knelt in the dust at her feet. "Mama." She opened her eyes. She looked at him. She did not speak. "Mama, I am sorry." His voice was barely a whisper. "I am so sorry. I was foolish. I was broken. He shook his head. "There is no excuse. I know that. I just need you to know that I know, and I need to ask your forgiveness, not because I deserve it, but because I cannot live with myself if I don't." Mama looked at her son, this man on his knees in the dust, this child she had starved for, this person she had almost stopped recognizing, and she felt all of it move through her at once. The pain, the humiliation, the loneliness, the nights she had cried without sound so her sister-in-law would not hear. She felt all of it. And then she felt something older and stronger than all of it. She placed her hand on his head. "You are still my son," she said. "You will always be my son." Her voice was steady. "I forgave you before you came. I forgave you every morning when I prayed for you. But hear me, Toby. Hear me well." She lifted his face to look at her. "Do not ever again let anyone use your pain as a weapon against someone who loves you. Pain makes you blind. That woman knew that. She used what should have made you hold me closer to push me away. Do not be that blind again." Toby broke completely. He cried into his mother's lap the way he had not cried since he was 7 years old and fell off a mango tree, and she had held him in this same compound. She held him now. Old hands, strong hands, the hands that had made him. The kola nut was returned to the earth. Sarah married Desmond 6 months later. The marriage lasted 8 months before Desmond, who had only wanted the money, left for another woman. She returned to Abuja, to her family, carrying nothing but the consequences of her own choices. Toby rebuilt, slowly. It took time, the kind of time that cannot be rushed. He brought Mama back to Lagos, this time to a house he bought in her name, a small bungalow in a quiet estate where she had her own kitchen, her own garden, her own door that no one could drag her out of. He never remarried quickly. He took his time, and he learned to listen differently, not just to words, but to what words were trying to hide. And every Sunday morning before church, he sat with Mama in her garden while she cooked, and he listened to the old Igbo songs she hummed, and he memorized them, really memorized them this time, because he understood now that some things, once lost, do not come back. Junior's photograph sat on Mama's mantelpiece. She lit a candle beside it every evening. Not in grief, she said, in gratitude for the brief, bright time she had been her Mama big. Some people will carry the guilt of what they did to their mother for the rest of their lives. Some will get the chance to come back. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And if it moved you, subscribe to this channel and drop a comment below. Which part of the story touched you most?